In this tutorial, I'll talk about using the survey flow to change the order of your events in your survey. I'll also talk about embedded data and embedded variables, as well as how you can have Qualtrics automatically score people's answers. So let's start with the survey flow. Actually, sorry, let me back up a second. I want to start by walking through the experiment a bit that I've set up for this example. So first, this is a levels of processing experiment. So what we typically have people do in these experiments is to study several lists of words and answer different types of questions for each list. For example, in this first list, people would answer whether or not each word was in uppercase letters or not. So you can see here, they first see apple in uppercase and banana in lowercase. For list 2, we have them consider whether the word rhymes with a given word. So for example, does this word rhyme with bear, chair? So the participant would select yes. And for the last list, we have them typically answer a question about category. So for example, does this word fit in the category animal, cat? Yes, it does. So once they go through these 3 lists, I then gave participants a recognition test where they simply answered whether or not they studied each of the items shown. Now, this is a simplified example with only 2 words per list, and our recognition test has all of the studied items, but it's enough to show you how to use these tools in Qualtrics. So now let's start with the survey flow. Over on the left-hand side, we've been typically working with this clipboard icon. That's where you build your survey. But if you click on the icon underneath this, it has 2 rectangles. This is your survey flow tab. And you can see a quick summary of the blocks that participants will complete that you've set up in your builder part of Qualtrics. So you can see here, first participants see the instructions, and then the uppercase list, rhyme list, category list, and lastly, the recognition test. The survey flow allows you to make big changes to your survey by moving these blocks that you've created around. So this is why it's helpful to map out what questions you want to include within each block. So let me show you a couple of tools that you can use within the survey flow. First, you can easily change the order that your blocks are shown. For example, I can select move here and move my uppercase list to after the other 2 lists. This can also be done within your builder, but it's a little bit easier to do within the survey flow. You can also add blocks and remove blocks if you want. So for example, maybe I want them to study the uppercase list twice. So I would say add below. I want to add a block. And I would select the uppercase block. So now it's going to show those 2 words within that block twice to participants without me having to create an entirely new block with the same questions. All right, you can also delete blocks out of here using the delete option on the right. And now I'll show you some of the more advanced tools. The first is using branch instructions. So this is an option that you can use rather than using skip or display logic, where let's say I ask participants after the instructions, do you understand what you'll be doing? If people say no, I want to send them to the end of the survey because I don't think they're paying attention. So I could select add below, branch, and actually this won't work quite so well because I don't have that question programmed. So let me give you another example. For this first question they're asked, is apple in upper or lowercase letters? Apple is in uppercase letters. So maybe if people say it's in lowercase here, I want to send them to the end of the survey because they're not paying attention. So I can select Q2 here and say, if Here, they select no, meaning Apple is not in uppercase letters. Then I want to send them to the end of the survey. Or maybe I want to start them on the category block rather than having them complete the other category, the other lists. So branching gives you that if then arguments that you can use with your display, like your display and skip logic. We can also easily set up counterbalances within the survey flow as well. Let me show you how to do that. So we want everybody first to see the instructions, but then maybe we don't want everybody to answer the uppercase questions, then rhyme, then category. That would introduce a confound to our study because each person studies the uppercase list first. So any effect we find between answering these three types of questions could be driven by the fact that they studied the uppercase list first. So let's change the order for different counterbalances of which order they complete these lists. To do that, everybody's going to see the instructions. So then underneath that, we're going to add a randomizer. Now under the randomizer, we're going to add our counterbalance conditions. So we'll go add a new element, and I want to add a group. This is a way to just organize the order that people are completing things. So I'll call my group counterbalance 1 here. And I want them to use the order we have. So uppercase, then rhyme, then category, and lastly, the recognition test. Now, let's create counterbalance 2. I can set it up manually, like I just did for this counterbalance, or I can duplicate the counterbalance and then make the changes within that duplication that I need to. So we'll call the second group CB2. And maybe I'll have them complete the category condition first, then uppercase, then rhyme. And lastly, let's make a third counterbalance where they do rhyme, then category, then uppercase. Now, even though these are grouped into different counterbalanced names, you won't see in your data which of these three counterbalances people are assigned to. So we need to put in what's called embedded data so that we can see which of these three conditions people completed. So to do that, we'll add below here and say we want to embed or insert embedded data. So let's just call this counterbalance. That's going to be the name of our variable. And where it says set a value now, we will set that to 1. We can add as many variables here as we want. So maybe I'll also create order, and my value for counterbalance 1 will be uppercase, rhyme, category. Okay. Now the embedded data needs to be within my first counterbalance group, even though it's added separately. So let's move that to before the blocks occur. And I'll show you a data file at the end of this video and point out where you will see these embedded data values. Now there's one other thing we have to do with our randomizer. We want people to be randomly assigned to just one of these counterbalances rather than completing counterbalance 1, then 2, then 3. So to do that, we'll say just randomly present one of the following elements. And if we check evenly present elements, that means that it will randomly sample without replacement. That means if it randomly selects CB2 for the first participant, CB3 for the second participant, it'll automatically give the third participant CB1. That way you have a semi-even number of people within each of your counterbalances. All right, so that's how you would use embedded data and the survey flow. The last thing I'm going to cover in this video is using scoring within Qualtrics. So I'll hit apply here on my survey flow so that Qualtrics saves all of my changes. And now we're going to go to this last icon that looks like a few toggles that you can move. It's called survey options. Under survey options, we're going to scroll down to scoring. And now what you can see here is it has all of the blocks and questions I've created. So you can see the block names here on the left-hand side. We have the instructions block, uppercase, rhyme, and category. And then we have the recognition test last. So I'll probably want to score people's responses on the recognition test to tell how many of the items did they correctly say, yes, I studied, or no, I didn't study. In this case, all 6 of these items were actually studied, so people should say yes to each. So if we want to count up how many of the questions they got correct on this recognition test, all we need to do is click for each question next to where it says yes. It then puts a 1 here, which means if the person selects yes to did you study apple, it will give them a score of 1 point. If they also say yes for banana, it'll give them a score of 2, and so on and so forth. Now, sometimes we want multiple scores or to break up our score based on some factor. For example, maybe we're interested in how many words from the uppercase list, which was apple, banana, did they get correct, versus the rhyme list. So you can set up subcategory scores on this page as well by going up to category and on the right-hand side, selecting scoring options. Okay, we can then add a new category, and maybe we'll call the first one uppercase and the second rhyme. So now we can update the scores for how many of the words studied in the uppercase list did people correctly say, yes, I studied those, and how many items in the rhyme list. So let's do each of these. All right, to set each of your subcategories, at the top where it says category, you'll want to select, we'll start with uppercase. All right, and here, the words from the uppercase list were apple and banana. So on the recognition test, we want to give 1 point for saying yes to each of these. So for our uppercase score, we'll click yes here and yes here, but leave the others blank. All right, then lastly, we need to do the same for the rhyme category, but this time the rhyme words are chair and desk. So under the recognition test block, we need to select yes to chair and yes to desk. Now scrolling through here, the scoring for this category also kept banana in there. So we need to clear that out because that was actually an uppercase word rather than a rhyme word. All right, so we have our scores set up for the uppercase words, the rhyme words, and an overall score. Let's publish the study, and I'll show you the data of what these tools add to your data set. So one thing to note is that the scoring within Qualtrics can't work with loop and merge fields. So if rather than having separate questions for apple and banana, I used loop and merge to present apple and then banana within the same question. I couldn't create these automatic scores. So that's one thing to keep in mind. So let me switch my shared screen. There we go. So here you can see these are a few responses that I generated before making this video. If you scroll past all of their responses, you can see the scores that were automatically generated. And in this version of the study, I didn't have an overall score. I just made the uppercase and the rhyme categories. So here in these responses, I answered yes correctly to two items, the two items that were studied in each list. You can also see, based on our embedded data variable, the counterbalance that each person completed. The first participant was randomly assigned to counterbalance 1. The second two were randomly assigned to counterbalance 2. All right, that's it for this video. Thanks for watching.